They laughed at Malcolm Varon before he even touched the car. The laughter came from the marble steps of Hawthorne Crest, a mansion so large that the circular driveway had its own fountain, security station, and underground garage. 5 luxury vehicles stood beneath the white stone portico, polished for the engagement celebration taking place inside. Beyond the open doors, waiters carried champagne beneath crystal chandeliers while a string quartet played for investors, politicians, and members of the wealthy Ashbourne family. Malcolm stood beside an old service truck wearing oil-stained coveralls and carrying a metal toolbox that had belonged to his father. He was 41, broad-shouldered, quietly observant, and accustomed to people deciding what he knew by looking at what he wore. Near the mansion entrance, Tristan Ashbourne watched him with amused disbelief. "You brought a roadside mechanic here?" Tristan asked the security chief. Malcolm stopped beside the black luxury sedan parked closest to the steps. Security Chief Von Lasker lowered his voice. "The vehicle displayed a brake system warning when Mr. Allister returned from the city. The dealership cannot send anyone until tomorrow." "Then leave it in the garage." "Your father requested it for tonight." Tristan glanced at Malcolm's truck. Its paint had faded, one headlight was slightly cloudy, and the company name on the door had been hand-lettered, Varon Automotive and Restoration. Tristan smiled. "My father's car is worth more than that entire repair shop." Malcolm set his toolbox down. "That doesn't make it harder to diagnose." Several guests near the entrance turned toward them. Tristan's fiancée, Camille Renshaw, covered a laugh with the rim of her champagne glass. "What exactly is wrong with it?" she asked. "I haven't inspected it yet." "But you're confident." "I'm confident cars don't care how much their owners paid for them." Camille laughed openly this time. Tristan descended one step. He was 36, tall, polished, and dressed in a midnight blue tuxedo tailored to make him look more powerful than he was. He had spent most of his life being introduced as the future of Ashbourne Dominion, a transportation and logistics empire founded by his grandfather. That evening's celebration was officially his engagement party. Unofficially, it was the night his father planned to announce Tristan as the company's next chairman. "You should be careful," Tristan said. "That car belongs to Alistair Ashbourne." "I know who owns it." "Then you understand that if you damage anything, you will spend the rest of your life paying for it." Malcolm opened the driver's door. "If someone has already damaged it, you may have a more expensive problem." The laughter stopped. For the first time, Tristan's smile weakened, only slightly. But Malcolm noticed. Alistair Ashbourne appeared in the mansion doorway before Tristan could respond. At 68, he still carried himself like the man whose signature could move shipping fleets across continents. His silver hair was combed neatly back, and his black dinner jacket concealed the medical monitor attached beneath his shirt. He had suffered a mild heart attack 4 months earlier. Doctors ordered him to reduce stress. Instead, he accelerated succession planning and began reviewing 20 years of company decisions. "Malcolm," Alistair said. The way he spoke the name made several people look between them. Not mechanic, not boy, Malcolm. They had met 12 years earlier after Malcolm repaired one of Alistair's vintage cars during a charity rally. Alistair respected people who solved problems without performing for approval, and Malcolm had become the only independent mechanic permitted to service his private collection. Tristan had never understood why. "The warning appeared after I left the headquarters garage," Alistair explained. "The brakes felt soft near the north gate." "Did anyone else drive it today?" Tristan answered too quickly. "No." Alistair looked toward him. "I asked Malcolm." Tristan lifted one shoulder. "I'm trying to save time." Malcolm crouched beside the front wheel. He ran one finger along the inner rim, then examined the pavement beneath the car. There was no visible fluid. That bothered him. A ruptured brake line usually left evidence. "Open the hood," he said. Tristan laughed again. "You don't give orders here." Malcolm looked up. "I was talking to the security officer." Vaughn pressed the release. Malcolm inspected the master cylinder, fluid reservoir, electrical connections, and diagnostic port. The fluid level appeared normal. No warning codes explain the soft pedal Alistair described. He moved to the rear of the sedan. "Do you have the key?" Alistair handed it to him. Tristan stepped between them. "Father, this is unnecessary. We have two other cars." "I asked him to inspect this one." "You're keeping 200 guests waiting." "They came for our champagne. They can survive without my presence for 10 minutes. Malcolm pressed the button to open the trunk. Nothing happened. He tried again. The vehicle's lights flashed, but the trunk remained locked. "Was it working earlier?" he asked. Alistair frowned. "Yes." Vaughn moved closer. "The electronic latch may have failed." Malcolm examined the seam beneath the rear window. The trunk did not simply appear locked. It had been manually disabled. Someone had removed power from the latch after closing it. "Has the vehicle been inside the estate garage since you returned?" Malcolm asked. "For approximately 2 hours," Vaughn replied. "Who has access?" "Family, security supervisors, and selected household staff." Tristan folded his arms. "This is becoming ridiculous. Repair the brakes or leave." Malcolm looked at Alistair. "I need the emergency trunk release." "It is inside the trunk," Tristan said mockingly. "The interior release cable can be accessed behind the rear seat." Tristan's expression changed again. This time, Alistair noticed. Malcolm opened the rear passenger door and lowered the center armrest. Behind a leather panel, he found 2 missing screws and a faint mark where someone had recently forced the access cover back into place. He removed it. The emergency cable had been cut. Vaughn stopped smiling. Alistair looked toward his son. "Why would someone cut the trunk release?" Tristan answered without looking at Malcolm. "It could have happened during servicing." Malcolm examined the fresh metal strands. "This was cut recently." Camille stepped down from the portico. "Tristan, perhaps we should go inside." He turned on her sharply. "Stay out of this." Her face stiffened. Alistair watched both of them. "What is in the trunk?" "No one knows," Tristan said. Malcolm stood. "You do." The air around the entrance changed. The guests who had laughed now pretended not to be listening, but no one returned inside. Tristan moved closer until only a few feet separated him from Malcolm. "You were called to inspect a warning light. You are not a detective." "No." Malcolm picked up a slim pry tool from his box. "But somebody disabled the electronic latch, cut the emergency cable, and tried to keep this trunk closed. That makes me curious." "You will not force open my father's car." Alistair's voice became cold. "It is still my car." Tristan turned. "Father, open it." Malcolm protected the paint with a padded wedge and accessed the mechanical latch through the rear panel. The job required patience. Whoever had disabled the trunk knew the vehicle's design and had damaged 2 secondary mechanisms. After 4 minutes, the lock released. The trunk rose several inches. A strong chemical smell escaped. Malcolm froze. Everyone stepped back. Vaughn reached beneath his jacket. "What is it?" "Solvent, possibly fuel additive." Tristan grabbed the edge of the trunk and tried to close it. Malcolm caught his wrist. "Don't." The 2 men stared at each other. Tristan's face no longer held amusement, only fear. Alistair stepped closer, ignoring Vaughn's attempt to stop him. Malcolm raised the trunk fully. Inside were 3 black duffel bags, a silver hardshell case, several license plates, a security uniform, and 2 transparent containers filled with dark liquid. Beneath them lay a folded blue tarp. The silver case bore the logo of Ashbourne Dominion's Internal Auditing Division. Alistair recognized it immediately. That case disappeared from headquarters last week. Tristan backed away. Camille's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the driveway. Vaughn pulled the first duffel bag toward him and opened it. Inside were bundles of cash. The second contained passports issued under multiple names, prepaid phones, and company access badges. The third held several sealed envelopes labeled with the names of senior Ashbourne executives. Alistair's complexion changed. "Call the police." Tristan stepped toward him. "Father, wait. You don't understand what you're seeing." Alistair looked at his son. "Then explain it." "The car was used by dozens of people. You said no one else drove it today." "I meant after you returned." Malcolm moved the containers carefully. A rubber hose lay underneath them, along with a mechanic's pressure tool and a pair of dark gloves. He examined the hose. It had been used to withdraw brake fluid without leaving an obvious leak beneath the vehicle. The master cylinder reservoir had looked full because someone had replaced most of the fluid with a clear industrial solvent. Under light braking, the system might still respond. Under repeated pressure or heat, the seals could fail. Alistair had been expected to leave the mansion after the announcement and drive down a steep road toward the city. The car had not developed a problem. It had been prepared to lose its brakes. Malcolm looked at Vaughn. "Do not let anyone start this vehicle." Tristan's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're talking about." Malcolm held up the hose. "Someone drained part of the brake fluid, replaced it with a solvent that damages hydraulic seals, and disabled the trunk because the equipment was still inside." "You're guessing." "The fluid can be tested." Alistair's hand tightened around his walking cane. "Why is the audit case in my trunk, Tristan?" "I didn't put it there." "Then who did?" Tristan looked toward Vaughn. For a moment, Malcolm expected the security chief to protect the heir. Instead, Vaughn took out his phone. "I'm calling county investigators." Tristan struck the phone from his hand. Several guests gasped. Alistair did not move. The sound of the phone hitting the stone seemed to divide the evening into two parts. Before everyone understood, Tristan was afraid, and after. "Lock the gates," Vaughn ordered into his radio. Tristan turned toward the mansion. Two security officers blocked the entrance. Camille stepped away from him. "What did you do?" she whispered. Tristan looked at her with naked anger. "You knew enough." "I knew about the accounts, not this." Alistair looked between them. "What accounts?" No one answered. Malcolm opened the silver case. Inside were copies of shipping invoices, property transfer records, private bank statements, and an encrypted storage drive. A handwritten note rested on top. "For Alistair, if I do not return." The note was signed by Nadine Oro, Ashbourne Dominion's chief compliance officer. Nadine had disappeared 9 days earlier. Her car had been found at the airport. Police initially believed she had fled after stealing company funds. Tristan publicly described her as a trusted employee who had betrayed the family. Alistair had not accepted that explanation. He had ordered a private review and planned to confront his son after the engagement announcement. Now Nadine's missing evidence sat inside his trunk. Malcolm searched the compartment more carefully. Beneath the spare tire, he found a small blood-stained scarf and a damaged bracelet. Camille made a choking sound. "I've seen that bracelet." Alistair looked at her. "Where?" "Nadine wore it at the foundation dinner." Tristan moved toward the car again. Vaughn restrained him. "This is insane," Tristan said. "Anyone could have planted these things." Malcolm stood between him and the trunk. "Why were you so desperate to keep it closed?" "Because you are contaminating evidence." "You called it ridiculous before you knew it was evidence." Tristan's face reddened. "I will destroy you." Malcolm looked at him calmly. "You laughed when you thought I was only fixing a car. Now you're threatening me because I opened it." Police arrived within 17 minutes. By then, the engagement celebration had collapsed. Guests remained inside the mansion under security supervision. Investigators photographed the trunk, sealed the containers, and separated every person who had access to the garage. Tristan demanded his attorney. Camille asked to speak with detectives alone. Alistair sat inside the library while a paramedic monitored his heart. Malcolm remained beside the sedan because the lead investigator, Captain Rowena Thatch, wanted him to explain exactly how he discovered the altered brake system. "You are certain the solvent was intentional?" she asked. "I am certain it does not belong in a hydraulic reservoir." "Could it have been introduced during maintenance?" "Not by accident." The fluid was removed and replaced in a measured amount. Whoever did it wanted the brakes to function long enough for the car to leave. Rowena studied the cut cable. And the trunk? Disabled from inside after the evidence was loaded. Then how did the person get out? They didn't enter the trunk. They accessed the latch wiring through the rear seat, then resealed the panel. Rowena looked toward the mansion. Someone familiar with the vehicle. Or someone who received instructions. The security footage from the underground garage should have answered the question. Instead, investigators discovered a 43-minute gap beginning at 3:12 that afternoon. During that period, the sedan had been parked in its private bay. Vaughn insisted he had not authorized the cameras to be disabled. The system log showed the command originated from Tristan's executive access card. Tristan claimed the card had been stolen. It was later found inside his tuxedo jacket. By midnight, detectives had enough evidence to arrest him for tampering with a vehicle, obstruction, possession of stolen corporate records, and attempted destruction of evidence. But Nadine Oro remained missing, and the bloodstained scarf suggested the case was much larger. Tristan was taken away through the same driveway where he had laughed at Malcolm hours earlier. Before entering the police vehicle, he looked back at his father. "You are choosing a mechanic over your own son." Alistair's answer was quiet. "I am choosing what was in the trunk." The investigation dismantled the public story of the Ashbourne family in stages. For 4 years, Tristan had been diverting money from Ashbourne Dominion through a network of false shipping vendors. The invoices inside Nadine's audit case documented payments to companies that owned no trucks, warehouses, or employees. Funds moved through foreign accounts before returning to investment properties controlled by Tristan and Camille's brother, Felix Renshaw. Nadine discovered the scheme during a routine compliance review. Instead of reporting it immediately, she gathered complete evidence because Tristan controlled several members of the executive committee. She feared a partial accusation would allow him to destroy records and discredit her. Her note to Alistair explained that she intended to place the audit case inside his private car during a charity dinner at headquarters. Security footage confirmed she approached the garage carrying the silver case. She never left the building through a public entrance. Tristan insisted he had no contact with her that evening. His phone records proved otherwise. At 10:46 p.m., he called Vaughn's deputy, Mason Drell, a former military mechanic who supervised security vehicles. Mason had recently paid off a large gambling debt with funds traced to one of Tristan's shell companies. Mason was the person who altered the brakes. He admitted it after detectives found solvent residue inside his workshop locker and his fingerprints on the hose in the trunk. According to Mason, Tristan did not originally plan to kill his father. He planned to delay him. The brake warning was supposed to appear before Alistair left headquarters, forcing the sedan into the executive garage. Tristan would then retrieve the audit case hidden inside the trunk before anyone opened it. But Alistair ignored the warning because the brakes still seemed functional and drove home. The evidence traveled with him. Tristan panicked. He ordered Mason to enter the estate garage during the engagement preparations, remove the case, and further damage the brakes so Alistair would suffer a serious crash later that night. Mason entered using a service uniform and a copied access badge. But before he could remove the case, household staff entered the garage to decorate a second vehicle. He hid the tools and containers inside the trunk, disabled it, and escaped through a maintenance corridor. He intended to return after the party began. Malcolm arrived first. Captain Rowena asked Mason about Nadine. His story changed 3 times. First, he claimed he never saw her. Then he admitted seeing her arguing with Tristan. Finally, investigators confronted him with blood evidence recovered from the scarf. Mason revealed that Nadine had discovered Tristan inside the garage after placing the case in Alistair's trunk. She threatened to call police immediately. Tristan grabbed her phone. During the struggle, she struck her head against a concrete pillar. She remained conscious. Tristan ordered Mason to take her to an empty Ashbourne warehouse and hold her until he could decide what to do. Nadine escaped before dawn. Injured and disoriented, she reached a roadside motel under a false name. She feared local police because Tristan had boasted about his family's influence. 2 days later, she collapsed and was taken to a small clinic in another county without identification. She remained hospitalized in a medically induced coma while authorities listed her as missing. After Mason's confession, investigators matched her fingerprints. Nadine survived. When she regained consciousness, she confirmed the conspiracy. Tristan had not struck the blow that injured her, but he had ordered her unlawful detention, concealed the incident, stolen the audit evidence, and later attempted to arrange a crash that could have killed his father. Camille accepted immunity for providing financial records. She admitted helping conceal the false vendors and lying to investors, though she claimed she knew nothing about Nadine's detention or the brake sabotage until the trunk opened. Felix Renshaw was arrested for laundering company money. Mason received a reduced sentence for cooperating. Tristan faced charges of attempted murder, kidnapping conspiracy, corporate fraud, evidence tampering, and obstruction. The Ashbourne board suspended him within 24 hours. Alistair resigned as chairman 1 week later. He did not resign because investigators accused him of participating in Tristan's crimes. They found no evidence that he knew about the fraud. He resigned because the company culture that allowed the fraud had been built beneath his authority. He had promoted his son despite repeated complaints. He had ignored executives who described Tristan as vindictive. He had treated family succession as more important than independent oversight. At the emergency board meeting, Alistair spoke without cameras. "I believed giving my son power would teach him responsibility," he said. "Power does not teach character. It reveals what character was already there." Nadine returned to the company after several months of recovery, but only after the board established independent control of compliance investigations. She refused a ceremonial executive title and demanded real authority. Malcolm returned to his repair shop. For several weeks, reporters parked outside and asked him to describe himself as the mechanic who exposed an heir. He disliked the phrase. "I opened a trunk," he told one reporter. "The evidence exposed him." Interest in his shop increased. Owners of rare and luxury vehicles arrived from other cities, hoping the famous mechanic would inspect their cars. Malcolm accepted ordinary jobs first: a delivery driver with a failing alternator, a teacher whose old sedan overheated, a single mother who needed new brake pads but could not pay the entire amount until Friday. One afternoon, Alistair arrived alone. He did not come in a limousine. He drove an older gray coupe from his private collection and parked beside Malcolm's service truck. Malcolm was rebuilding a transmission when Alistair entered the garage. "You have an appointment?" Malcolm asked. "No." "Then you may be waiting." Alistair looked around the workshop. Photographs of restored cars covered one wall. On another hung a framed picture of Malcolm's father, Gideon Veyron, standing beside a racing engine. "I never knew your father was a mechanical engineer," Alistair said. "You never asked." Alistair accepted the correction. He placed an envelope on the workbench. Malcolm did not touch it. "What is that?" "Payment." "You already paid the repair invoice." "This is not for repairing the car." "Then take it back." "You prevented my death." "I found evidence in a trunk." "You discovered the brake contamination." "Because you hired me to inspect it." Alistair studied him. "Why do you refuse every attempt I make to thank you?" "Because rich men often use money to finish conversations they do not want to continue." The words landed harder than anger. Alistair put the envelope back inside his coat. "What conversation am I avoiding?" "The one about why everyone on those steps believed your son knew more than I did before I opened my toolbox." Alistair looked down. "They judged you by your clothing." "They followed his example." I did not laugh. "You allowed him to become a man who thought he could." For years, Alistair had praised directness in boardrooms while ensuring few people dared direct it toward him. Now he stood inside a modest garage with no employees nearby to soften Malcolm's words. "What should I have done differently?" he asked. "You should have listened the first time people told you who Tristan was." Alistair nodded slowly. "I intend to create an independent safety division for company vehicles." Malcolm returned to the transmission. "Good." I want you to direct it. No, you have not heard the terms. I have a business. You could keep it. I have a life that does not depend on your family. Alistair almost smiled. That may be why you are the person I trust. Trust does not create obligation. No. Alistair looked toward Gideon Varen's photograph. But perhaps partnership could. That word made Malcolm stop. Alistair explained that the company operated more than 8,000 vehicles across shipping yards, warehouses, and regional delivery networks. Internal reports showed neglected maintenance, falsified inspections, and pressure on drivers to operate unsafe equipment. Tristan had suppressed several complaints because repairs reduced quarterly profits. Alistair proposed creating an independent fleet safety foundation funded by Ashbourne Dominion but governed by mechanics, drivers, and transportation experts. The company could not remove its director without approval from the independent board. Malcolm asked one question. Will drivers be able to stop a vehicle without being punished for missing a deadline? Yes. Put that in writing. 3 months later, Malcolm accepted the role. He did not move his office into Ashbourne headquarters. The foundation operated from a renovated industrial building beside his original shop. Its first employees included mechanics, former truck drivers, investigators, and safety engineers. One of them was Marisol Trent, a warehouse driver fired after refusing to operate a truck with damaged steering. Malcolm reopened her case. The company restored her job, compensated her, and disciplined the manager who falsified the inspection report. The foundation discovered hundreds of deferred repairs during its first year. Profits fell temporarily. Accidents fell permanently. Tristan's trial lasted 9 weeks. His attorneys portrayed him as a frightened son who made disastrous decisions while trying to protect the family business. Prosecutors showed jurors the hidden audit case, the disabled trunk mechanism, the altered brake fluid, and messages ordering Mason to make sure Alistair did not reach the city that night. Nadine testified from the witness stand. She described waking inside the warehouse, hearing Tristan tell Mason that an employee's disappearance would be easier to explain than the collapse of an empire. Malcolm testified only about the vehicle. He did not dramatize the discovery. He explained hydraulic pressure, chemical contamination, the cut release cable, and the reasons the sabotage could not have occurred accidentally. Tristan's attorney tried to dismiss him. You run a neighborhood garage, correct? I own an automotive restoration and safety company. You are not an engineer. I hold master certification in vehicle diagnostics and 22 manufacturer qualifications. You never worked for the manufacturer of this sedan. I completed their advanced braking system program 4 years ago. The attorney changed direction. Isn't it true that your newfound fame has benefited your business? Yes. So you profited from accusing my client. I did not accuse him. I opened his father's trunk. The jury convicted Tristan on every major count. He was sentenced to decades in prison. Camille avoided incarceration after cooperating but lost her professional licenses and most of her social standing. Felix received a long sentence for laundering money. Mason's cooperation reduced his punishment, though the judge reminded him that fear of Tristan did not excuse preparing a vehicle to kill another man. Nadine later became chairwoman of Ashbourne Dominion's Independent Ethics Board. Alistair spent more time at Hawthorne Crest after leaving the company. The mansion felt different without celebrations arranged to display his family's success. He sold several of his cars and donated the money to employee injury funds. He kept the black sedan, not because he wanted to drive it again. The vehicle remained in a secured training facility operated by Malcolm's Foundation. Mechanics and drivers used it to learn how deliberate tampering could resemble ordinary failure. The trunk was displayed open. Inside were replicas of the audit case, solvent containers, tools, and disabled latch components. A small plaque nearby contained no mention of Tristan's wealth or the Ashbourne family scandal. It read, "Never assume a warning is insignificant because the person noticing it has less authority than the person dismissing it." 5 years after the engagement party, Malcolm visited Hawthorne Crest to inspect the estate's remaining service vehicles. The marble steps were unchanged, the fountain still ran. But the mansion no longer seemed as powerful as it had that first night. Alistair stood beneath the portico with a cane. "You remember them laughing?" he asked. "Yes." "Does it still bother you?" Malcolm considered the question. "It reminds me to pay attention when a room decides who matters before anyone has spoken." Alistair looked toward Malcolm's truck. It was newer now, but the hand-painted company name remained on the door. "You could afford something more impressive." "It starts every morning." "That is a mechanic's answer." "It is the correct one." Before leaving, Malcolm walked past the place where Tristan had threatened him. For years, the heir had believed the mansion, the company, and his surname could control what everyone around him saw. He was almost right. The guests had seen an oil-stained black mechanic standing beside a billionaire's car and assumed the distance between them was measured by money. Tristan saw the same thing and believed Malcolm could be mocked, ordered away, or blamed if necessary. But Malcolm understood the vehicle better than anyone on those steps. He recognized the disabled latch. He found the contaminated brakes, and when he opened the trunk, he exposed more than stolen files and hidden tools. He exposed the heir who believed an empire was powerful enough to bury evidence, silence a woman, and turn his father's death into an accident. The people outside the mansion had laughed because Malcolm looked like the least important man there. By the end of the night, he was the one person Tristan could not afford to have near that car.